Hey,
Perfect. Hey, camera's over here. They're just ranking all 47 at once. We are ranking all 47 at once. Me and Star are gonna rank these teams. This is Star's first time seeing a lot of these teams. We actually were really tired after we got home from dinner last night. Make sure to leave a like on the video. We have 35 viewers and only 19 likes, and it is free to leave a like on the video, and it helps push us into the algorithm, and that would be fantastic. So the rundown of how we're going to do this, you see all of the teams on screen right here. And we're just going to go, and whatever team we're talking about, we're just going to hover over and just look at the Pokemon like that. Not the most professional, I'm sorry, but we got a list on the side. I'm going to say a couple of notes, and then Star and I are going to talk about our opinions, probably no more than 5 minutes per team, because there's 47 teams. There are 47 teams that we have to rank. 47. We're only ranking 47 teams because I'm not ranking myself, because I'm obviously first. That's just not fair. You know what I mean?
Okay, normally I'm against John, but no, his team is actually just like the best team possible.
Somebody sign me!
Go ahead and get in here. Number 47, Ghost Trickster Leo. And I feel bad about this because he's a very active member of the community. I really like the guy. And before we say anything else, I do want to go ahead and say that these rankings are not reflective of how I think you're going to do or how you are as a player, just how I think your team is. I don't even need to look at them. Like, Bestmon Corviknight is where, unfortunately, we went wrong here. Corviknight's a fantastic Pokemon, fantastic glue piece, and I do agree it should be valued pretty high in post-home Paldea decks, but you can't get away with it being your best mon. And then you have Secondmon Dondozo. Like, you have good Pokemon, you have good pieces, but you don't have a top-tier threat that you're supporting with these Pokemon. What do you think, Star?
So, yeah, no, I agree with all of that.
I think you have really good support pieces. I just don't think you have breakers. You just don't have breakers. You have Iron Leaves. Iron Leaves is cool, plus Pincurchin is cool, and Halucha is cool, but it's just you don't have a top tier threat that people are going to have to prep for every single week. So unfortunately, we are going to have to rank you last. Number 46, Apple is going to be up next. Unfortunately, round 1 Regieleki and round 2 Gyarados isn't going to get you too high on the draft list. You have best mons Dragonite and Lilligant Hisui, which those mons are good. Those mons are good, but Dragonite has no Terra, and you chose not to Terra Lilligant, which I'm not saying Terraing Gyarados was the wrong decision, but you don't have, much like the previous team, any top tier Pokemon. You have decent Pokemon. Gyarados is cool. Dragonite is cool. Even Azelf is a Pokemon that you have to prep for, but there's no Pokemon that immediately you have to be super worried about.
I immediately think that's like, oh wow, if you could Terra any mon into any type, wow, you're top tier, you're crazy. But unfortunately, it's like everybody's fighting for the Terra spot, even though I'm pretty sure 2 of them are Terra banned by the points.
Yeah.
I think Gyarados is one of the best Terra, like, just abusers if you're not looking at the top tier mons. I used it once before, and like, you chose great typings for it. I would almost say that instead of flying, electric is a little bit better.
Apple said before he is primarily a VGC player, which totally makes sense. Again, we're not hating on these teams by any means, and the fact that we're calling these people bad, it's just this team objectively in draft is not a very good team. But round 1 Regieleki in standard, in singles draft league, not gonna get you there, unfortunately. Trey, man, we gotta talk. You have Annihilate Iron Moth, and that start is horrifying. This is the first 2 Pokemon you have are fantastic, both good Terra options. I don't fault you for doing Terra Annihilate by any means. Iron Moth could have done it as well, but those 2 mons are fantastic. It's just the support pieces that you followed it up with. I'm a little confused and a little lost as to what these Pokemon do on the team. Like, Bisharp is your Steel, and you mitigate that a little bit with Terra Steel Annihilate, which is really, really cool, but your team has a lot of weaknesses. And like, the notes I have for you, Moth for Fairies and Terra Water Ape to set up on the bulky waters is really cool. But then you pick mons not because they did anything for you on your team, but just because they kind of look cool. Like, Jolteon is a cool Pokemon to like help break waters, and so is Breloom, but were those the best options available? Probably not.
I'm proceeding in chat. Yubby had a really good point. So a bad team can become really good with just like 1 or 2 transactions. I 100% agree. I think this team right here is so close to being just really good.
So again, shout out to Trey, man. You have been awesome in this community. You've been such an active member, and I really do appreciate you. But you got 2 Pokemon on your team, straight up. And
strap your face though.
Another active member of the community. I don't know how to say your name. Cocky. I'm not sure. I'll say Khaki for right now. My notes for your team is, if this was a VGC draft, your team would be fantastic, right? Like, you had first Montinglu, which in draft league is unfortunately not the best, but then you have some good pieces around it, like Meowscarada and Zoroark, Grimmsnarl. Again, like, if this was a VGC draft, this team would be fantastic. None of these, similar to all of these bottom teams, you don't have a great number 1 option, and I'm not sure how good in singles Terra Tinglu really is.
I agree with that, actually. Yeah, okay, so this team, honestly, it's got a bunch of hitters, but a lot of sleepers too. I think Volcanion really good this gen, since a lot of the waters just aren't as good in Paldea decks. They're just not as good, straight up. Like, you could have probably gotten away with Terra Gyarados, and I think that would have moved your team up maybe like to 2-3 slots. I think that's like such a really helpful thing to know.
We have not seen a Moltres squad yet. Yes, Aurora, you are right. Moltres is actually going strong right now with no bottom tier teams so far. So shout out to you guys for doing so well. That is 3 Articuno teams so far, and I actually think the next one is also an Articuno team. Armenia is going to be next up, and let me see what the notes were for this one. So second best Mon Gengar is really tough. I see the Cyclizar being prioritized because of Rapid Spin, but I don't necessarily understand taking it over like an actual second option. I don't understand Chestnut in the second round. I think Landorus is fantastic, but the problem with this team is that Landorus is really going to have to carry a lot of these games, right? You don't have a great fairy resist because Gengar doesn't really switch into fairies, and you took Terra or Steel type Lucario, which is a little bit of a tough look. So Arcanine is really gonna have to be your fairy resist there, and your hazards are a little weak because with this team composition, you're just straight up never gonna be able to run rocks on Lando. It's just impossible. Lando's gonna have to be your breaker. If you ever are able to run rocks on Lando, I would be surprised. It pains me to rank a Lanad team. I'm also, the last note that I have is I am a little curious as to why no Terra Ground Lando, why we went Water Fire.
I think your team would really benefit because you have so many of these just hard hitters, but you need to get them in some way, and they're not bulky enough to just come in every time. You know, Gengar, not bulky. Azumarill, bulky, but if you bring offensive, well, it's not going to be the bulkiest. Lucario, not bulky. Lycanroc, not bulky. So you just have no way of like pivoting around very easily. You're going to be kind of on the back foot until you can. You're going to have to basically be on the back foot until you can find one good prediction to put yourself in the driver's seat.
Dude, Articuno stays losing. Holy shit.
Dude, come on, dog.
Come on, Articuno. Come on, Articuno.
Come on, guys.
You guys took the longest to draft, and here we are.
Bro, you had so much
having
extra
the worst
time.
teams, man. What's going on? You guys really thought about how to draft the worst teams possible. Come on, guys. So the next team up that we are going to have is going to be the Blood Hungry Beedus with Dan. Round 2, Toxapex is going to do this to a man. Unfortunately, Toxapex lost most of its moves and is not viable in a draft league setting. It's like a last-ditch effort for a bulky water type. I do like a Spothra plus Heatran and Hoopa. I think those 3 Pokemon are really cool together. Unfortunately, much like all the teams here at the bottom section, Spothra really just... With non-free Terra, a Spothra really isn't a number 1 option on a team. You don't really have a number 1 option. I like things like Lilligant, getting momentum into things like Hoopa to break, and I really like Hoopa paired with a Spothra, actually. I think on paper, Hoopa breaks the Darks for a Spothra, which is fantastic because the Darks want to switch into Hoopa, and Hoopa does massive damage to them, and then a Spothra will have a little bit easier of a time late game. And I like Zapdos. The momentum with Zapdos to break those waters is fantastic, and Zapdos plus Heatran is fantastic. But again, you just have a lot of really fine Pokemon, no top tier hitter. Yeah, and he confirmed he's a OU ladder player, so that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
This makes sense again. Like this makes sense. You're a first time draft player. Like this whole team makes sense then immediately actually.
Exactly.
But that was number 43. We're gonna go ahead and move on to number 42 here. I think we have another Zapdos fellow here. So still no Moltres, which is insane. So the next person here is gonna be Pikachu. Who is in Zapdos. The team is definitely interesting. I think first round Glow-King isn't the furthest reach in the world. I think it's fine when you're close to back wheel. Enamorus is definitely a good pairing with this, and I see that you made it Terra Water. You understand that you didn't have a bulky water, right? So you made it Terra Water, which is fine. I do think that I would have rather you get a bulky water and then make it Terra Ground. I think your team would be a hell of a lot more threatening in this instance then, and I like Dougie in the sense that it's able to trap the steel types that your team doesn't like at all. This man really valued his rapid spin. Valued his rapid spin. Modem for the secondary, or not Modem. I wrote down Modem. Heat Rotom? Oven Rotom is cool for a secondary fairy resist. This team kind of picks and choose Pokemon that don't really fit their roster. Like you are just throughout up and down the roster, other than Glow-King, you are immensely weak to Fairy, and you have Steel type Berserker, which is a little bit tough.
I think a lot of these teams on the lower end, you can see a commonality is that a lack of like good ability to pivot around and get good momentum going. A lot of the time on this team, since you don't have that bulky water to kind of like cushion the fall of a lot of Mons, you're going to make a lot of predictions, and you're going to take a lot of unnecessary chip on a lot of guys.
We have our first... No, never mind. Still Articuno.
Oh.
Some bitch. So Mountain is going to be the next one up. Team does look fun. I will not lie. The team does look pretty fun. Great Tusk, Walking Wake Sun is an insane combo, and I don't know how you got it that late. I keep looking over here. Walking Wake Sun, Great Tusk, insane combo. Don't know how you got it that late. Enamorus, you chose the right Terra types, I think, especially for this team. Your Ice Resist and Fairy Resist is Fortress. and that is not good. You're gonna bring Fortress, and I want you to be prepared. If you are going to want to win games, Fortress is gonna come to pretty much every damn game, and that means that you've pretty much got 4 mons locked in, 5 mons locked in every single week. Fortress, Walking Wake, Torkoal, Enamorous, and Great Tusk. You can switch out one of those every now and then, but those 5 are pretty consistently going to come to every single game. I think you need some sort of bulky water. I think that is really what this team is lacking at this point.
I think this team, like we said earlier, is 1 transaction away from being really, really solid.
Yeah.
I think if you changed Articuno Galar, specifically Articuno Galar, and Ice Resist, like a water type, like just a secondary water, your team is like top 15.
Next up is going to be Waiichi, and this team is really interesting because they don't have a top tier Pokemon. They did not take a round 1 Pokemon. They took Urshifu Rapid, which is interesting. If they would have Terra'd it, I would have not necessarily disagreed with it. I don't know. There's definitely always better options than Urshifu Rapid round 1. But they decided to Terra Tyranitar, which I think is super weird because you lose the Spadef boost, you get hurt by Sandstorm. I don't really understand it, but this team is interesting because while it doesn't have a top tier Pokemon, it does have 4 really good second options for a team. It has Urshifu, Thundurus, Gengar, and Corviknight, all of which are usually good second options. Like if any of these could have went round 2 and I wouldn't have batted an eye, and you got all 4 of them, which are really good. I think those 4 are going to have to come every week though. The team otherwise doesn't really mesh super well. Next person is again in Zapdos. Dude, I cannot stand that Moltres is going to do this. I want you guys to be prepared. I think we're going to have like 9 Moltres in a row here in a second. So next up is going to be Blue. I have some issues with this team. I think if you would have started with 5 Pokemon that just worked so well in conjunction with one another. Walking Wake, Torkoal, Slitherwing, Volcanion, Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl is a little weird here, but I do think it's a little underrated because it helps Slitherwing set up and it helps Walking Wake take a hit and not get ult-code by something and live a little bit longer. So that was fine. Decidueye also fine, but then you switched up and you went to a Rain team. I'm not sure why you did not just fully commit to the Sun team, because you would have had a very good Sun team if you would have just fully committed, but you kind of shifted gears and you went to a Rain team that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and then your support pieces outside of your top 6 don't really make sense. I don't really agree with Pelipper, Basket Legion. Obviously don't agree with the Rain strat. I don't like Revavroom as the steal on this team. I don't think, because you're already so weak to ground, and then you get something that's gonna die to any ground move ever. Sandaconda is fine, I guess, and Electro's fine, I guess, but not the pieces that I really wanted to see round out this draft.
Shout out to Electro though.
But Electro's not needed on this team,
Shout out
man.
to Electro.
All right, boys. Moltres.
This is an Abomasnow.
Moltres.
So
Moltres has fallen. Here we go. First Moltres team. We are going to be Walking Wake, Espathra, Torkoal, and then kind of just some Pokemon after that. So Wigglytuff does kind of bring the team down just by being on the team. You do have a good breaker to complement Espathra, which I think is something that is needed in Walking Wake. I think Walking Wake plus Espathra is interesting. I'm also just now realizing you did not Terra your Espathra, and if I would have realized that, you actually would have been a little bit lower. I'm not going to lie. Outside of that though, the team does have a lot of non-breakers. You don't have really any breakers outside of Walking Wake. You have Brubana, which is an underrated breaker for sure, especially in Sun, but then your Pokemon are kind of just weak after that.
Honestly, my biggest advice is drop Regieleki. Stop drafting Regieleki.
Stop drafting Regieleki. No Terra.
It's not good.
Another Moltres. We have 2 Moltres in a row. I told you guys, it's about to be like 9 Moltres in a row. IUX Panda. And there are a lot of faults with this team, but there are also a lot of good things for this team. That's kind of where we're getting to now. We're getting to the teams that are kind of like a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10, like decent enough teams that have some stuff, but they fail at a couple of categories. And the main thing with this team, you look at the bottom half of this team, and there is no bottom half of this team. The support pieces don't make a lot of sense. The Terra on Ceruledge is interesting, and if you want to try it, then fantastic, but you have 2 Pokemon at minimum that would appreciate it more in both Thundy and Hoopa Unbound. Even Rillaboom might be interesting, but Ceruledge is arguably better than that. No Steel type is very, very unfortunate for this team. With no Fairy Resist, Alolan Dugtrio does not count, by the way. And the removal is very limited with Avalugg. If you guys have not already, be sure to leave a like on the video. And if you haven't joined the John Jr. Discord server for whatever reason, go ahead and join, and you can follow with these matches every single week. And you might as well subscribe while you're here, man. You're obviously enjoying it. You're sticking around. Bleedle at number 36, who is going to be of the Articuno division. Articuno taking L's left and right, man. This is just tough look for Articuno. So we are going to have Bundle, Cinderace, Kingambit, and then some support pieces that I don't necessarily get. I like Kingambit. I am always interested to see how it's used with Terra, because I don't necessarily know what the best 2 types are in draft. I think it's pretty up in the air depending on what team you have. Bundle plus Cinder is really cool and really tough to switch into, and I like the momentum between those 2 and the coverage of those 2 offensively. And you have really good top tier speed tiers with things like Kilowattrel too, which will help you break the waters that you are going to struggle with, but you are going to struggle with waters. Bulky waters are going to kind of get in your head a little bit, be able to kind of sit on you. You're going to really rely on Kilowattrel, which maybe isn't a bad thing, man. I did that for a while and it was a really good Pokemon. And the big thing with this team, I think for me, is you have a lot of pivot and you have a lot of really strong Pokemon, but you don't have really any setup options to win games. You don't have any Pokemon that can come out and click Swords Dance other than like King Gambit, and put on immediate pressure that way. Sandan over here with the mascot pick, with shout out for the mascot pick. I always respect that. Slowking Lando is sick. That's a first two great picks, but the team in conjunction. Roaring Moon Lando?
Oh, I think it's Slowking.
I might have said Slowking.
I'm literally
my bad. Roaring Moon Lando is a great 1-2, but then the support pieces around it, I don't necessarily understand. You have Steel and Poison type Reverum. You don't really have a great Fairy Resist into Roaring Moon, which I think is a little weird. And yeah, you are Terra Fire, which can mitigate that a little bit, but I do think not having a Fairy Resist around Roaring Moon is a little weird. I feel like you didn't really build around Roaring Moon. I felt like you grabbed mons that maybe work together lower tier wise, but not really that help get Roaring Moon out there, help get Roaring Moon to a position to win games. It looks like Roaring Moon's more still going to be like a pivot on this team, which I don't necessarily love. The next person is going to be Wombo, who is in Moltres. Let's go. Let's get all those Moltres haters in here. So speed tiers on this team are really cool. You have Sneasler, Meowscarada, Kilowattrel. Kilowattrel was taken super early, and of course Cleavor. I like those 4 Pokemon a lot in conjunction with one another, but this team, it's kind of not great breakers. Like you have decent, I don't know, man. Like Sneasler's cool, but not really a first overall option. Meowscarada with spike support is definitely cool on this team. You lack a Fairy Resist, unfortunately, because Typhlosion doesn't count. You have Goodra as your Steel type, and then you have Sneasler as your Poison type, so you actually simply do not switch into Fairy types ever. Fairy types blow you backwards. And you don't really have great ground resists either. Like Kilowattrel is going to be forced to make a lot of uncomfortable switches on ground types, and if they click a rock move, then you're in a really tough spot. Or if they get rocks up, your team obviously doesn't really appreciate rocks. You like Donphan a lot. You have Cleavor, which might be forced to run Boost Defog a couple of times. Donphan's a pretty reliable spinner, but you're going to pretty much have to bring it every single game to force hazards away. So main gripes with this team: no Fairy Resist, no ground resist really.
Yeah, I think John's definitely right on that. When I look at this draft, it looks like you started drafting in round 2. Find yourself a ground and a Fairy Resist, and then we can talk.
Yeah, that'd be good. His team is Iron Bundle, Meowscarada, Arcanine, Hoopa. His team, like on paper, the team doesn't have anything necessarily wrong with it. You have no removal outside of Komala though, which is a little bit of a tough look. And I'm a little bit questioning the random Abomasnow. I assume it's just for Iron Bundle 100% accurate Blizzards, but I'm not 100% sure. And I do like the fact that you Terra Steeled Salamence, because your Steel type is Lucario, but still, like, you're gonna have to get that Terra off, and other than that, you don't have a Fairy Resist. It's just Muck. Arcanine as well. Arcanine probably is actually not that bad. But most things will probably get ground coverage. I do like the breakers on this team. I think the pivoting with Bundle and Meowscarada into Hoopa is going to be really good. The pivoting into Lucario, the pivoting into Salamence, I think the pivoting is going to be good. And now we're at the point where there's nothing inherently wrong with these teams. It's just there are other teams that are better at this point.
I don't have anything bad to say about this team. I think it's just a very good middle of the pack team.
Yeah, it's good, not overwhelming, right? Like that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be true with a couple of these next teams. We're gonna have Bick, who I know is an avid draft league player from Owen's community. So Chi-Yu, Quaquaval, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm just gonna be straight up with you. Star's probably gonna disagree with my ranking of this team.
Chi-Yu's good, man.
I'm an avid Chi-Yu hater. I think Chi-Yu is not the best Pokemon on a team. In 16-man maybe, but I'm just not a big fan of Chi-Yu, but I do like the top 3 that you have: Chi-Yu, Goldingo, and Quaquaval. Even though I'm not good with the Pokemon, I understand that the Pokemon is good. The thing with my team, or the thing with this team, in my opinion, is your speed tiers are really poor. And the big thing, we're going to talk about this later too, because there's a Chi-Yu team that does this perfectly, but the big thing with Chi-Yu is the fact that it always wants to run Scarf. So normally you want to bring some speed around it, or some speed control in some way around it, and you don't necessarily have that. Quaquaval with Aqua Step is a good step in that direction, and Tornadus with Tailwind isn't going to come every week, but again, it's a good step in that direction. But you don't have very many Pokemon that outspeed Chi-Yu. I think it's actually just Tornadus. Yeah, it's just Tornadus. So my thing with Chi-Yu is you definitely want to surround it with speed, so it can be more of that breaker role and not want to be forced into Scarf, which I do feel like on this team it is gonna do that. And also my other gripe with this team is your ground resist are pretty heavily limited. You're kind of relying on Earthworm and Tornadus, but Tornadus that doesn't count.
Serena's good.
Serena sucks. All right, next up we are gonna have another Moltres. We're gonna be talking about Pep. This is a really good start. Chien-Pao, Zapdos, Galar, and Klefki are all really good picks. Klefki was a smart pick, probably a little early, but you got to value your steals and fairies and Paldea decks, right? So I like Klefki just because it helps chien-pao set up, on top of the fact that it is one of the few Pokemon that can actually check chien-pao pretty well. So I like those Pokemon, but I think after that, your team kind of just doesn't really have great support pieces. But those 3 Pokemon in conjunction are probably the best 3 in conjunction that we've had of teams that don't really have support pieces. I also had a note here. I'm not sure how I feel about Terra Salamence on this team. Especially without a type to beat fairies, because that is going to be your biggest struggle with this team. You do not beat fairies. All of your best line lose to fairies. You have chien-pao, Zapdos, and Salamence, so you might want to change that Terra type if you do keep Salamence as a Terra captain. I'm not even sure how I like it on the team, to be completely honest with you. We're gonna have Lemonade, who is gonna have the San Antonio Esper, Spectrier, Hisuian Samurai, and Arcanine. Spec Samurai is really cool. I'm a big Spectrier fan, and I think the best way to play Spectrier is going to be Spike Stack, and I think Samurai obviously does that fantastic. I'm not sure about it round 2, but it might have not made it back 2 because there's a lot of hype for Samurai right now. It is a Ghost Resist, and Spectrier, like I said, one of the most beneficial Pokemon when it comes to Hazard Stack. I don't love Mew on this team. I think Mew makes almost no sense because it just shares a lot of weaknesses with Spectrier, and it's just kind of worse. Like, what do you do with it in this team now? You don't have Stall Breaker Mew. Maybe you run offensive Mew, but it just kind of clogs a spot. The speed tier's not there. Mew just seemed like it was picked up because the points were available. You know what I mean? Terra Arcanine is interesting. I'm curious to see how that goes. With this current team, though, I probably would have been Salamence. Boston Blazikins over here. Now, the team, again, it is not bad. Top, yeah, you're looking at it, you're like, how the hell does John not like this team, right?
This is the John Jr. team.
This is the John Jr. team through and through. The speed gap between chien-pao and Mismag is enough to put it a little bit lower. There's not very many great Pokemon that you could fill that role with, but Mismag on its own is not really respected in most matchups just because it's not that great of a Pokemon, especially you're gonna have 6 better Pokemon usually in a matchup anyway. So it's really a speed gap between chien-pao and like Slithering or Glamora, I guess, if they will respect the Glamora or Rotom speed tier. So the speed tiers are a little bit tough, and one of the things that I do dislike the most about this team, the momentum in the chien-pao a lot, but you don't have a steel type, and steel types are super, super important, especially with chien-pao and Slitherwing and Dragonite. You have all these Pokemon that love switching in and doing a lot of damage, but have a lot of trouble switching in and get just blasted by fairy types. You just don't have Armarouge, like you don't have a good fairy resistance. Steel type is super necessary on this team, and you only have 1 remover, but it is what it is in Paldea decks. Next one is going to be Brother Robbie, who I'm just going to start out by saying that you have top 3 Pokemon fucking ridiculous. Like, these Pokemon are great. One thing that I do think brings down this team immediately, though, is the fact that you Terra'd Sneasler.
Yeah.
You have 2 Pokemon that would have benefited from it immensely more, which are Torn and Skeledirge. And not only the Terra and Sneasler, but I'm also a little confused on the types. But Torn and Skeledirge, if you Terra'd either one of those Pokemon, you would be sitting so much better. I probably would do Dirge, just because of opportunity cost. You would have even more points to work with probably, but I do like you like your top 4 are fantastic. You just need to change the Terra, right? Like that's my only gripe with those. But I think you have 2 fairies. Neither are great though. Mimikyu and Wigglytuff both aren't really good fairies. You have no bulky water, which is another thing that I think you should do for if you do Terra Torn or Terra Skeledirge. I think one of the types should always be water. We're gonna have a Zapdos division member here. We are gonna have Window Frame.
That's a fire name. I love that name.
My initial, just looking up and down this team, your steel type is Magneton. Not a good look. Especially for a team that has best 2 offensive pieces being Excalibur and Greninja. You have Amoonguss to switch in 2 fairies, which is fantastic, but Amoonguss is pretty much going to be forced to come every single week just based on your team composition. You also picked up Hawlucha, another Pokemon weak to fairy that I don't necessarily get on this team. I don't know what Hawlucha is doing here other than simply for the speed tier, maybe filling the gap in between Greninja and base 100 at Zoroark, I suppose. Yeah. So this team will struggle defensively for sure, but if you can get into a good position offensively, you are going to overrun your opponents. I really do like the electric on backs as well, just to break waters, because your team does struggle with breaking waters. But yeah, just offensively, your team is great. I do like Slowking on this team too. Slowking is a good defensive piece, but I think defensively, you are going to struggle with Slowking. Plus, Amoonguss is fantastic, but you're pretty much set in stone going to bring those certain Pokemon. Maybe change Lucha to something else, I think is what I would say. We have SJ, who is #1 mod. We have Palafin, Kingambit, and Zapdos, which is a fantastic start to the team. He said he didn't even really want Zapdos, so I do like the team initially, but I do think there are some weird mons and weird picks that you just want to try. Like, I think Iron Thorns on this team doesn't make any sense. I think Iron Thorns is really weird on this team, especially with how weak you are to ground outside of Zapdos, which is another concern of mine. just being that weak to ground. But I do like Zapdos plus Palafin. Palafin obviously doesn't like the Zapdos matchup normally, so taking that off the board is really cool. There's no real hazard setters besides Gastrodon. And I imagine in this comp you don't really want to be rocks with King Gambit. You want to be more of an offensive King Gambit. This team looks like it's trying to enable King Gambit to be an offensive piece, which is going to be fantastic. I do like that aspect a whole lot, but otherwise the team's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think Iron Thorn needs to be here. I don't think Typhlosion Hisuian needs to be here.
I was talking about a little bit earlier, a Chi-Yu team that I think did Chi-Yu right. We are going to be talking about Stein, I think is how you say it. Stein.
Steinbaum.
I am a big fan of Sneasler plus Chi-Yu. I think neither is really a round 1 pick, but I think that them in conjunction with one another are fantastic. But you see most of his Pokemon are momentum, U-turn, draft league player clicks U-turn. He has speed and Sneasler and Noivern and these things that outspeed Chi-Yu, which is exactly what Chi-Yu needs. And these Pokemon that can get into Chi-Yu pretty safely, slow, potential slow U-turns and Volt switches with Rotom and Magnezone and Rillaboom and Uxie. Just I really like the fact that he has all of this momentum to Chi-Yu, and I think it's going to enable, the whole point of this team looks like it's to enable Chi-Yu to be a good breaker. I would personally make Chi-Yu the Terra captain because of that. I think Chi-Yu would benefit more from the Terra. I don't think Sneasler Terra is bad, and if you want to keep it that way, then so be it. But I do think Chi-Yu on this build would benefit from it. The big downside of this team, the reason that it falls this low, is the lack of a fairy type. No fairy type. Dragons run you. Lisbon Air Slashers, I think that's how you pronounce it. Urshifu Glowking is a tried and true combo. I think these two mons work very well together. Greninja is a scary offensive pivot. Doesn't necessarily need to count as a dark type because of the fact that it does have protein. And then Thunder is paired with this to break the waters. It's just a fantastic start to the team. And Thundurus as the Terra captain, I think, is the objective correct choice on this team. And I like the Snow Core, the late Snow Core with the Chili Reception and Glowking. I think that's fantastic and really, really cool, and I'm excited to see how you do with it. I like Talonflame for the speed, for the momentum, for the even Defog, and Gastrodon's just a good water type. Like, you just have a good team up and down. The only things that I don't like about this team is the fact that your steal is Caparaja, and Caparaja got a big nerf this generation, is unfortunately not that good. I probably overpriced it because I didn't know it lost those moves whenever I priced it, but and then the fact that you don't have a fairy, which seems to be pretty consistent with a lot of these teams just because there's a lack of fairies, but no fairy is gonna be pretty tough, and that's just gonna be the only like really big downfall for your team.
I would say one thing: draft Pineco. Pick a Pineco.
All right, we're moving on. I'm always biased in just like Chi-Yu teams, especially with it not being Terra, but you do have some nice complementary pieces to it. Ting Lu is a weirdly good pairing with Chi-Yu, actually. You have two dark types, which, yeah, you're a little weak to fighting, but you do mitigate that with Enamorus, Slowking, and Amoonguss, so you don't really have to worry about that. But Hazard Stack in the Chi-Yu is really, really good. Chi-Yu is a Pokemon that really appreciates Hazard Stack. Enamorus is also a cool breaker with this. It can break the dark types that maybe could switch into a Specs Dark Pulse from the Chi-Yu. I don't think there's anything wrong with this team, but it's also just simply not good enough to be a top tier team. If you are still here, be sure to leave a like on the video, and you might as well sub while you're at it. Only 21% of my viewers are subscribed. This is a hold on. This is a good team. This is a good team. We're getting to like the 7.5 out of 10s. Like, these are the top teams. These are teams that are really, really good. Dragapult plus Ursaluna is just it's a goated core. Like, it's just great. There's nothing really wrong about getting these two Pokemon together. Ursaluna obviously resists all the things that Dragapult doesn't enjoy. It's fantastic. Not dark types, I guess, or fairy type. It's just fat. It's a fat Pokemon. I do like the Fire Terra on King Gambit to make it a fairy resist, because otherwise your fairy resist is Tinkatuff, Toxapex, and Moltres is a fine fairy resist. But King Gambit being a fire type is fantastic on a team that has Dragapult, and besides Ursaluna and I guess King Gambit, you don't have the strongest Pokemon to immediately come out and immediately break. And a lot of people too are saying that Noivern is redundant on this team. I definitely agree. That is a good point that I forgot to write down. Moltres plus Dragapult does make Noivern kind of redundant. I do like it as a pivot because it pivots on the fairy types, helps ship down the fairy types, but it definitely is a little bit redundant. But Volt has a really good core. Urshifu, Skeledirge, Thundurus. I don't understand the Terra Dark on Skeledirge. I feel like Terra Fairy or Terra Water would really be good on this team, and I don't necessarily think that the team's bad in any other way. Azu and Thundy are amazing pairings to Urshifu. You get pivots, you get Azu to wall the fairy, or to wall the ice hits on this team that this team doesn't really appreciate otherwise. And then even later on down the line, you see he has Scizor, which Scizor is just an amazing pairing with Urshifu. One of the best steals, in my opinion, that he could have paired with Urshifu, other than like Corviknight, and that's like a round 7 Scizor. The thing that I don't like about this team is going to be speed. You lack a lot of speed. You have Thundurus with 111, you have Urshifu with 97, and Mew at 100, which I don't know if it's respectable or not this generation, but speed is going to be the main thing where I think this department, or the main department where I think this team is kind of lacking. Yeah. Great combo. Obviously, Ursaluna plus Dragapult is fantastic. I don't agree with Ursaluna being Terra. I'm excited to see it be used, but I do think Thundurus was always 10 out of 10 times the correct Terra on this team. Glim paired with these Pokemon is also fantastic. Dragon Bolt is a known Pokemon to love Hazard Stack because it does miss out on crucial KOs. Ursaluna obviously also will appreciate the Hazard Stack, and I like the momentum with Thundurus and Cleavor breaks Dark types for Dragon Ball, which is fantastic. This is just overall a good team if you just take the top 6 Pokemon plus Dondozo. Umbreon, ass. It's a ghost resist, but you have Ursaluna, so why does that really matter? You do obviously want a dark type for the psychic types, but Umbreon is just so bad this generation. It's unbelievable. Slowbro, grounded poison, I guess, and also a psychic type. You had both of those types already, so I'm not sure how Slowbro fit on the team. The Mimikyu is a secondary fairy to Hatterene, as well as a secondary ghost to Dragon Ball. So those Pokemon just, I don't think have any purpose on this team. Aurora Draco. The top 4 mons in conjunction with one another are ridiculous. You pick the right Terra because Spectre is Terra banned. Spectre plus Glow King is awesome. Greninja as a pivot into the Glow King and as a breaker in general is fantastic. And then obviously Glow King bounces off that really well. It's a fairy resist and it does fantastic. And then you have Lilligant Hisui, which I do think it was the right Terra choice. I don't know about the Terra types. I'm not a big Hisui and Lilligant user. I think Hisui and Lilligant on paper is a great Pokemon into Spectre because it's momentum. It's a fighting type that's really, really powerful. I like it a lot. And then I really like how you prioritize Tinkaton, as there were not a lot of fairies and steals in this deck. So we get to the bottom half of your draft though, and again, this is just going to be the way it is with a lot of people. Crest blows this generation. Don't fall into the trap. You don't need Crest. You have Slowking Galar. I'm not sure what Crest is doing on this team other than a Levitate user. You have a lot of other options though for a potential ground resist. You don't even have a flying type. I like Mudsteel as a rocker, and the team overall is a pretty good team. We have Mr. Mag here. Mr. Mag. And the only big thing that I see wrong with this team is going to be speed tiers. Garchomp and Iron Jugulis being your fastest Pokemon is going to be a really, really big downside when there's a lot of really fast Pokemon in this meta. I like Jug plus Chomp and Slither a lot offensively. I think they do a lot for each other offensively, but defensively, not the best. You lose to fairy types, but you did mitigate that a lot by getting double poison, Glamora, Clodsire, which I do think is a little bit redundant, but it is what it is. And then Rotom Heat all in the next 3 rounds. So I think you covered up your weaknesses well. One thing that I will say that makes no sense on this team is, please, for the love of everything, drop Revavroom. You don't need Revavroom. Why do people keep drafting Revavroom? You have 3 poisons. Get a different steel, any other steel, literally any other steel, and you'll be fine. Next up, we do have another Moltres member. We do talking about Clyze. Now, Clyze's team, I really, really like. Lando, Volcarona, Samurai Hisui, Hydreigon are all really, really cool together, and I like that you have Terra Volcarona plus Hazard Stack. Lenard, you have the classic Lenard. Everybody loves Lenard, and you have Hazard Stack with it. I like Bronzong. Bronzong is the steel is really cool. Iron Hands to break the water is really cool. The only inherent problem that I have with this team is that the speed tiers are super cluttered. You have Lenard, Volcarona, and Hydreigon all but within 3 speed points of each other, which is not very good. When it comes to prepping, it's going to be really easy to prep for those. Other than that, this team is really, really good. It does lack a true bulky water. I'm not sure how bulky Hisui and Samurott is off the top of my head. Like, kind of mid, it's kind of alright. So other than that, you just lack true bulky water. Yeah, and yes, they are lacking a great hazard removal. It's just Serena, but at least they have some. There are a lot of teams that don't have literally any, unfortunately. Spectre, Tinglu, and Annihilate is amazing. That is an amazing start for a team. You have Hazard Stack into Annihilate and Spectre, 2 Pokemon that really appreciate Hazard Stack. Mew is also kind of cool on this team, I guess. It's not the best. It's fine. Toadscrow as a remover is really cool. And then outside the top 5, I have a big problem with this team. You don't really have any good support pieces on this team. Staraptor is a Pokemon that looks like you just kind of picked it to pick. There were maybe to fill the speed tier. No, you had Mew. I'm not sure why Staraptor is on this team. Hariyama as a low tier fighting is fine, but Alola on this team as the bulky water I don't necessarily love. Obviously there potentially weren't that many great options there. But Alola just sucks the life out of this team, I think. Obviously, it's like a momentum sucker on a team that really wants to get Spectrier and Annihilate bin. But I mean, the whole team kind of sucks momentum. That's like the whole downside of this team. You have good hazard stack. You have a decent enough hazard remover. And I like the fact that you went Fairy and Steel on Annihilate. It shows that you understand how Pokemon works. It just shows that you understand how Pokemon works. Because you had no Fairy resist until you went Terra Steel on Annihilate. And I think Terra Steel is going to be the one that you bring a hell of a lot on Annihilate. If you take away that, your Steel type is Hisui and Guja, and you don't really switch into Fairies. But I like your team overall. I like the top 3. I think the top 3 are going to be fantastic together. Number 14, Dracogon. Shout out Dracogon. So, your team, let me pull it up the notes, Dracogon. I cannot begin to fathom how you got the top 3 Pokemon that you got. Annihilate, Iron Bundle, and Lando. That's fantastic. Grimmsnarl to help set up with Annihilate is also really good, and set up with the Lando is obviously really good. Obviously, you have 2 top tier Terra Captains, 2 of the best Terra Captains in the game, in Lando and Annihilate, but I cannot fault you at all for picking Lando over Annihilate as your Terra Captain. One thing that this team is going to struggle with severely is going to be breaking bulky waters, and I think that's the reason why you chose Terra Electric on Lando, to kind of mitigate that a little bit. Lanad Therian is going to be fantastic for you. Gothitelle to trap potentially fairies that you don't love is going to be really, really nice as well, and even the bulky waters, Gothitelle can trap and beat most bulky waters, which is just going to be awesome for your team. You're still pretty weak to ice though, and I think at this point these are the best of the best teams. These teams are elite, the Yanma Blues, and so your team initially was not good. I don't know how to say it in any other way. Urshifu Rapid Goldingo, a round 1 and 2 wheel, is not good. Goldingo's a fine wheel pick, but Urshifu Rapid or Goldingo should never be your best Pokemon on a team. But somehow, I don't know who let this happen, everybody forgot Iron Moth existed, and you got it round 7. If you didn't get Iron Moth, this team would have been ass, but you got saved by Iron Moth somehow being there round 7.
Yeah, no, I think every mon on this team is good.
We're moving into Zach of the Articuno division. His team is going to be Palafin, Thundy T, Zarude, Cleavor, Ursaluna. I'm just naming off amazing Pokemon. I don't know how we got Ursaluna round 5. That is just fantastic. It's a great momentum-based team. Palafin, Thundy, Zarude, Cleavor. It'll struggle with bulky grasses a little bit, is the only thing I wrote down, but you have Cleavor for that. And obviously, Salazzle doesn't fucking count. And bulky grasses are hard to come by regardless. You got one of the best ones in Zarude, so you don't have the only gripes with this team is you don't have great hazards, but Cleavor is very, very reliable in the fact that it will get rocks up 95% of the time. And then you don't have the best fairy resist, I guess, but Ursaluna's fat enough to where does that really matter? Bulb over here has Urshifu, Iron Treads, Estera, Espathra, Skeledirge. Just a fantastic team all around. There's not really very many things to dislike about this team. I like the types given to Espathra for Terra, given the rest of your team. I think these were the correct choices. I don't know how much I like non-Terra Dirge on this team, but it definitely does fill some sort of a role as just a bulky fairy resist. Like it takes some pressure off of Iron Treads as a good, decent fairy resist. I don't know if I like Toxapex as the bulky water, but you have things like Speed Tears pretty well. You have fast Pokemon Talonflame. You have removal. Of course, Toadstool, best remover in the game. And of course, Iron Treads, I guess. That Pokemon kind of counts as a remover. You have all of the important roles. Nothing is super wrong with this team. All right, boys. We're moving to the top 10. Lanad, Goldingo, Cinderace, Samurai Hisui. Just such a good start to the team. These Pokemon, Lander specifically, is a Pokemon that loves Hazard Stack. And Goose he's gonna try his best with Lanad. It's Lanad season, baby. It just is. And Lanad plus Cinderace is, I think, a core that we saw earlier as well. Lando I plus Cinderace, which is just, it's a good core because Cinderace breaks the grasses, obviously, for Lanad. And I love Hazard stacking into Goldingo. I think that might be something that's overlooked with this team. Hazard stack into Goldingo is very, very good. Obviously, I had that in BBR, and you just can't get rid of it. You followed it up though, Goose, with the worst rapid spin in the game, and I'm sorry about that, but you have some good stuff like Palmot to help you break bulky waters, which you might struggle with. Orthrum's a fine steal. Like you have fine enough support pieces to where your team is not ruined. You have Orthworm plus Goldingo though. I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that, Goose. But you do have ground immunity Orthworm, which is pretty cool. I don't know if I agree with Flying Terra Water. Maybe it's fine. I don't know. I would have probably liked to see ground in that slot, but it's Lanad season, baby. It's Lanad. We're gonna have Horus at number 9, who is a part of the Articuno division. He might be the highest placing Articuno division person. I don't know, actually. Fairy Dragon Steel Core of Iron Valiant, Baxcalibur, and Scizor. And then you just round out the draft really well. Hydreigon plus Baxcalibur is a little weird at first glance, but it is pretty nice. Just the fact that you can beat down fairies pretty easily and they help each other out. Scizor is going to be really good for that fairy resist. Rotom, he obviously a secondary fairy resist. Muck can also beat down the fairies. There's very little wrong with your team. You have removal, you have hazards, you have momentum. You can get Iron Valiant in pretty easily. I like the support pieces just in general. It's tough to find things wrong with this team unless you don't like the double dragon, but I personally am a fan of these two being double dragon, especially with Terra Bax Caliber. Maybe you go non-Terra Dragon on your backs because you are double dragon, but otherwise, I love this team. So let's just talk about the top two Pokemon right now. Dragapult and Terra Volcarona. Insane. And then you somehow got Iron Treads round 3. I'm not sure how you were able to get these Pokemon in conjunction with one another. Not only that, but you then follow that up with Screamtail and Urshifu Rapid. Top 5 on this team are just fantastic. You got a good Fairy, good Steel in the first 4 rounds, an amazing Terra user, and potentially the best Pokemon in the decks. Urshifu Rapid, again, just a fantastic Pokemon with Dragapult. Just the fact that it's a great momentum Pokemon. It baits in fairies, can do big damage to them. It's an awesome Pokemon, and obviously you want a strong fighting alongside Dragapult. You have my favorite core in all of Pokemon in Volcarona Stomjom. Thriller coming in hot at number 7. His team is fantastic. We have Baxcalibur, Iron Shreds, Quaquaval Ball, Zarude, Arcanine, Azelf, Toxtricity, Enamorus, Ursaring, Cryogonal. Another team top to bottom. Not a bad Pokemon. You could bring each and every single one of these Pokemon any given weeks. Obviously, Cryogonal is only here because of removal, but you already have the second best remover in the game, probably in Iron Shreds. Terra Electric Bax helps you with the one thing that you do kind of struggle with, which is Break Waters, but even then you don't necessarily struggle with that because you have Zarude plus Toxtricity. It just helps alleviate it just a little bit. But the next team is going to be right beside. Number 6 is going to be Dashing. We're going to have Great Tusk, Zapdos, Volcanion, Gengar, and then a bunch of other dudes gooning out. So Great Tusk plus Zapdos and Gengar are just a fantastic core that when you say it out loud, you're like, well, these Pokemon aren't broken in draft. But you think about it, and Zapdos and Gengar cover really, really well for Great Tusk, Gengar breaking the fairies for Great Tusk, Zapdos breaking the waters. And then you pair that with a Terra Volcanion, which I'm actually really interested to see. I don't even know if that is a bad option on your team. Great Tusk does appreciate Terra, but Volcanion, why not? I'm very curious to see how it pans out.
This has been the best team that does everything overall pretty solidly.
We have Blake here with the number 5 slot. And you're taking me back to Gen 6 with this team, man. You gave me a lot of nostalgia picking Volcarona, Azu, and Hydreigon. That is literally a core that even Bronzong and Breloom, I could have went back to Generation 6 and seen this team. But you decided to add the best Rapid Spinner to ever grace the face of the earth in Great Tusk. So your team, there's just not very much to complain about. You fill all the roles. The only big thing is going to be speed tiers. You have Alolan Person 115, which is fine, but a lot of matchups, it probably isn't going to be respected. I'll keep it a stack. Alolan Person blows. So other than that, your fastest mon is going to be Volcarona, which is a little tough, but you have like everything you could ask for. You have hazards, you have remover. You have the best remover in the game. I just said that, the best remover to ever grace the face of this earth. So I helped Nick draft, so I'm a little bit biased. He has somehow, just like me, he got Tornadus Therian in round 2, which is ridiculous, but he also managed to get Heatran, and he put Heatran as his Terra, which I think it could be either way. I think it's a toss-up between the two. I don't think him making Heatran his Terra makes his team any worse than making Torn his Terra, right? I think his team's still good either way. Iron Valiant plus Tornadus is ridiculous. You have Heatran, one of the best steals, if not the best steal in the decks. I can't even think of a better steal off the top of my head. Rotom plus Heatran, fantastic. An electric resist for the Torn, a levitator for the Rotom. Like the synergy is perfect. Thank you so much, Mountain Man, for the subscription. I really appreciate it. Zoroark is really cool, and a Pokemon he really wanted to try. Gives a lot of offensive pressure, another special breaker, and momentum. The Slowbro plus Tornadus is just fantastic. Regen Core Spinner and Toedscroll Low Kicks is another good breaker that can help break things for Iron Valiant. Like the fairies that want to switch into it are going to take a lot of chip, and then Iron Valiant can potentially KO them with a Moonblast. And then Overcrow for the grounded poison and spike support. Every Pokemon on this team has a role. Every Pokemon on this team fills that role and does it very, very nicely. To Corey, Lego, Roaring Moon, Corviknight, Cinderace, Sandy Shocks, and Screamtail. So if he had Torkoal, this team would be set, right? Like this team would be gassed up. First of all, the momentum on this team is ridiculous. You have a good Screamtail, good fairy type, which I'm not sure how you got that round 5 with how much fairies are valued. That's fantastic. You have a good defensive backbone with Screamtail and Dondozo. You have all important roles filled from what I could tell. Other than a grounded poison, but you have Corviknight, who is the best defogger probably in the game from what I can remember of what kept defog, and it's a steel type and a flying type, doesn't care about T-spikes at all. You come in on those, defog goes away. So that being your biggest downside is not that big of a deal. You're just not missing much with this team. So number 2 is going to be Flapple. Flapple's team is fantastic. It's probably one of the best hyper offensive teams that I've seen this generation, at least. And I said during the draft, but this is just one of my favorite teams. The top 5 Pokemon in conjunction with one another fit so perfectly. It's like a puzzle. It's like a glove, even. Like these Pokemon, you have hazards, you have removal, you have momentum, you have speed tiers, you have breakers, you have setup options, you have a special breaker, a physical breaker, you have a steel type. The only thing you're really lacking from these top 5 is going to be a fairy type. And I'm now realizing that on the entire team, you're lacking a fairy type. But I do think that maybe you could switch up Roaring Moon to be Terra Fairy. I think that was my option that I wrote down, right? I did, yeah. I wrote that down. I think if you change Roaring Moon from flying to fairy, I think this team is perfect. I think there's very little that you could do to fix this team with the monster remaining. I think Pincurchin plus Iron Lead is interesting. It's not my favorite in the world, but I do think it gives a lot of potential there. And I think Gothitelle is pretty cool to remove Pokemon like specifically fairy types that Roaring Moon doesn't like to deal with. I think overall, this is the picture of hyper offense. This is what a hyper offensive team should look like.
I think this is the only team that I've seen so far that gets away without having a fairy. I think it's perfectly fine without a fairy at the moment, because you just cover everything that a fairy would need to.
My boy Tony Tagi, I love you, Tony. Your team is just so good. You have Chien-pao, Landorus, and Heatran. You just can't go wrong. You just can't go wrong with these top 3 Pokemon. You pair that with something like Screamtail and Quaquaval. You have good momentum. You just, Tony, it pains me to rate this, seeing all the shit that you've been talking in the chat, but you have all roles. You have good fairies, special breakers, physical breakers, good momentum in the chien-pao. You have a bulky water. You have good speed tiers. The only thing that this team is missing is not having Lurantis on the team. Other than that, it's a good team. My favorite part about your team, Tony, is the fact that you have 3 waters. I reside with that heavily, and I like it quite a bit. You have 3 removers, none of which are good, but that's fine. That's fine.
I think you have 2 really good removers and a Quaquaval.
Okay, well, guys, that is going to be the power rankings. If you guys have not already, Star is going to be in the top right-hand corner. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you guys. And for now, guys,